Hello and welcome to D-SETI. This is UAPs, the identification of intelligence. UAPs stands for unidentified aerial phenomena. This is a video in the Universal Language series, so we are applying the ruler and compass method of geometric analysis to data coming from UAPs through us in the context of CE5 experiences. This one graph that you see on the screen comes from the pulsation of light of a UAP filmed during a CE5 last summer by Rob Freeman, who films these things all over the world. It's a very incredible film. I recommend checking that out. All right. So this series is all about how ruler and compass geometry trees are applied to anomalous data from extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence sources. This got kicked off last winter solstice, that's about a month ago, because I had a dream of non-human intelligences approaching me, telling me to work with them, telling me to study geometry, providing me series of geometries about these proportions that I'm presenting to you. I was able to analyze dozens of crop circles, and then I turned that skill to marks upon the body, anomalous marks upon the body, most notably the red grid mark phenomena, and a novel phenomena I'm calling dots in a line that expresses these geometries. And they are explicitly associated with extraterrestrial non-human contact, generally through dreams or CE5 context. It is a non-harmful, respectful communication that appears to be going on. The communication is happening in this universal language of geometry, and it's being applied through these multiple sources. So what are the characteristics of this geometry? It is constructible through ruler and compass methods, meaning if you have a ruler and a compass, I have my compass here, I have my ruler here. These have been used to construct all the geometries that I'm talking about here. There is generally a presentation of a regular interval within this, these geometries, to which all of the other proportions sort of match. So we find a regular interval or pulsation of light or something like that that gives us a clue that this is geometric in nature and will help us understand how to construct the rest of the geometry. So it establishes a sense of regularity. So like the crop circles, you see, oh, this is clearly a regular polygon. Or with the red grid mark, it's clearly a hexagonal grid. Then there's some deviation from that, actually. So just like we deviate from musical harmonies to express meaning, it appears that there's deviations from this very regular pattern that's been established. It's really important to note that this is associated with CE5, that's human-initiated contact experiences. These do not appear, at least in my initial survey, to happen to people who are victims of abduction or something like that. So this really is geometry coming back to us as a language of communication. It is generally associated as well with an intuition of meaning. We feel this is meaningful, and that's in part what guided my inquiry to these several different modes of geometric expression. This inquiry is actually concurrent with Jimmy Blanchett's communication regarding geometry underlying some of the UAP sightings. This video actually was posted synchronistically with an inquiry I had to the Costa Macris's Facebook group, the CE5 Facebook group. I said, hey, is anybody else seeing anomalous geometry in relationship to CE5? And immediately below that post, which were approved at the same time by Costa, I saw this video, and it contains the proportions that I was seeing in anomalous body marks as well as crop circles. So we're seeing this in the sky. So I thought right now, so this video is presenting some novel analysis of UAP data. The feeling here is that the anomalous geometry proves an intelligent and intentional communication. They're getting back to us in a language that we can understand. And they're doing that through many modes of communication. Crop circles, body marks, I believe time codes, like when things are happening, and also radio signals. I'm looking at some very fascinating radio signals that clearly have these geometric characteristics, as well as UAP movements and pulsations that are being recorded. When I was engaged in this practice of looking at the marks on the body, I became very interested in other sources of data because the marks on the body is weird. It's weird and sort of invasive a little bit and presents not necessarily a clear and objective kind of expression of this geometry. It's too associated with personal type of stigmata experience. So I really want to validate this sort of geometry by finding it elsewhere. So I started reaching out. This is, I reached out to Rob Freeman, who hasn't got back to me as we spoke. I sort of jumped in and went to work with some of his public stuff. But I write to him, I say, hey, I understand that there was a geosynchronous UAP above Atacama with Dan, who is a mutual friend of ours. And a recent video by Jimmy Blanchett demonstrates geometric themes in line with my finding. I hypothesize that the behavior of the Atacama UAP or others in your collection may be analyzed using the ruler and compass method. Ruler and compass is different from protractor or arithmetic because every single communication can be related to an obvious unity value, like the initial circle used to describe crop circles or the regular interval in a line of dots. Further, congruence testing with the construction against the data is undeniable proof of intelligent and intentional geometric communication from intelligences with an effective theory of our mind. Regarding the UAP sighting, I hypothesize: 1. There is presence of geometry in line with the themes discussed by Jimmy or discovered in the variety of communications I've analyzed. Geometry will be found in either the movement of the UAP or the pulsation of the UAP as visually graphed on a timeline, or both. Third prediction, that the geometry will be signaled by presence of regular intervals that express unity or whole number ratios to unity. And then fourth, the geometry will involve only several simple construction methods with one or two unique construction methods. And they seem to be teaching us. So I emailed that to Rob about 11 days ago, and I became very curious. This Atacama experience is in part why I have been talking a lot about regression hypnosis, because I worked with Dan in a missing time associated with that. So I was hoping to get that data, but wanted to validate this. So I looked to another set in his public video archives. So there's caveats to this analysis here. And there is some variation of the pulsing of this craft, and that's due to atmospheric condition. I am actually unaware of the prevalence rates of lights in the sky that pulse in geometrically discernible patterns, but I think it's actually rare, and I think it actually truly demonstrates proof of intelligence of these communications. And it's important to note that these things may not be extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence in origin, but it's important to know that this demonstrates extraordinary technology and intelligence. So this shows the uniqueness of this phenomenon. I want to show some of the video that I'm using to analyze. I analyze the first 1,000 frames of a clip I have here. I'll just start this now. Here we are. And so it pans right to up here. And pretty soon it'll come to a pulsing of light. Maybe we'll skip forward to that. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, there's the flash. Top left, it looks like. All right, so he stabilizes this footage in just a moment, and we start to see this flash. It's really important that it's been analyzed by several people, and I'll talk about that soon. Once it becomes stable, I start to do my analysis, and yeah, this is really close to stable. So that's pretty much it. What's happening here? It feels meaningful. It's responding to an intention. It has a discernible pattern, and let's continue to talk about the next analysis here. Excuse me. So Rob then takes this to Dave Palachik from MUFON, who did an analysis of, like, was it a satellite, was it a plane, was it space garbage, and concludes, no, this is clearly a UAP. This is clearly a UAP. And so I just share that because we're not talking about a satellite, we're not talking about space trash. We're talking about something that responded apparently to human-initiated contact, and that apparently had a correlation with an impact of a cellular network grid. I mean, and stayed in orbit in anomalous ways. All right, so I wanted to analyze this to say, hey, I think actually these NHIs are communicating in many, many different modes through this very simple mean. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take I'm going to graph the intensity of the flash over time, and then produce a ruler and compass construction of that, so defining the proportions between the flashes. The strategy here is find the unity, what's the regular interval, and then explore all the relationships that might be possible, so that usually start with bisection or whole numbers, 2 or 3 times, 4 times that interval, and then I test for the golden ratio and start to see things. When I start to be able to construct the geometry, I then overlay it upon the image to really say, hey, this is congruent with geometry. The analysis method I applied to this video was I converted it to black and white, and then I applied a mask over the video. So I only allowed a little bit, only the circle around the flash, and I was able to find about 3 or 4 minutes of just that flashing UAP in the same spot in the video. And that is incredible, given that there was no real image stabilization happening in my video editing. So this is raw footage from the YouTube channel that really I could just stay on. And that's incredible even for a craft, right, and a camera. So good job to Rob for his wonderful footage. I converted each of those frames to an image file, and then I analyzed each of those image files, so they're all black except for a little tiny dot that allows for the UAP light to come in. And then I analyzed that for average brightness using a Python script. That produced a little bit of a noisy wave, and it was hard to get a signal, so I decided to, not hard to get a signal, I needed to apply it through some signal processing software that I'm not yet familiar with, so I'm going to do some research with that. But in the meantime, I annotated frame by frame manually of the first 1,000 frames, and I judged it in terms of the intensity of the blast between 1 and 10. And so I produced a data file that's 1,000 lines long, one per frame. I have the average brightness of that frame. I compare it with a moving average because there is a sort of ambient brightness and then a shift of that brightness in correspondence with perhaps the aperture shifting or something like that. So then I have a clean column of data, and then I annotated, is there signal or not in each of the frame, and then I said, how long frames per dot. So how many frames does this dot last? So how long are these pulsations? And what's the intensity of each dot in each of the frames? So that's the data I started working with. And then I graphed it using Tableau Public. The bottom, the middle band is the raw output of my analysis. So we clearly see these spikes. There's some noise stuff happening. The one beneath it, I'm comparing it to a moving average, so there's a sense more of equaling out of that average light kind of going up. And then the top line is my own annotation of the data. And as you can see, there is pretty strong correspondence with the raw analysis from the automatic analysis and the manual analysis. And so I take that and I printed it out, and I looked for intervals. And I produced this analysis, and it'll take you a little bit to see what's going on here, but you can actually start to see some very strong regularity and meaning. So the first thing that jumped out for me was the unity interval and the golden ratio. So do you see the blue lines, the ones that say 25 above them? Those are 25 frames between each of the pulses, right? So or 64 or 33. And I started to see, 25, 25, 25. That's the same size throughout the line. That must be the unity interval. So then I try to double it, see if that's there. I actually ended up using the golden ratio constructions to get the figures, to get the numbers. And so we see there's about 4 different intervals that are present within the first 1,000 frames of this analysis. And they are all more or less in golden ratio to each other. In terms of ruler and compass construction, they are nearly congruent. When I do analysis of the numbers beneath the frames and things like that, there's a little bit of wiggle room, and I'll talk about that shortly. So here's another, it's just moved down. There's a clear pattern. At the left, you'll see this, the purple lines. Those are, once again, sort of like all in ratio with one another. But it seems like there's this little gap between the purples, and then a new sequence is starting. So there's the blue, red, red, blue, red, red, blue, red, red, blue, red. What happens next, right? So there's a clear pattern there. Here's the simple constructions I use. These are the constructions I use based off of the unity interval. So I take the unity interval with the compass and I move it onto another line, and then I perform the golden ratio constructions. I color them in a specific way, so it's a sort of clue when you're looking at the chart, what is what, and then you can start comparing those with that, and you say, wow, that's actually congruent in terms of the proportions exhibited. In the number analysis, so I did frame by frame. So I did the intervals between each of the spikes, each of the pulsations of light, and I averaged those out. So each of the blue intervals averages to about 25 frames. All of the red ones 33. All of the purple ones 64. And then there were eight blue intervals. There were 12 red intervals, and there were 3 purple intervals as uniquely expressed on this single number line. These are kind of nested so that we could actually find the purple interval many other cases. So there's a sense of natural mathematical hierarchy to how these are expressing. The ratio between the average of the blue line and the red line, my hypothesis should be 1.6. Because that is the golden ratio. The same thing with the ratio between the red and the purple lines. I did the math, actually. It's 1.3 and 1.9, and those two average out to 1.6. So here I'm just talking about there seems to be some reference to the golden ratio, but not quite there. And one of the clues here is the crop circle construction, where they often take the width of the lines that they use into the construction methods themselves. So at first glance, with blurry eyes, it looks like they're using very simple techniques, and then you go, wow, actually they did this very complex, so that this, that little interval is like compounded through proportion and accounted for in really sophisticated ways. And I think that's what's happening here, because when you look at this expression, you can see the clear and distinct proportions, and they are very congruent with the ruler and method construction, ruler and compass construction, but less so with the numeric. And I think there's meaning behind that. So I say there's about 100% signal in the first 1,000 frames of my analysis. These 1,000 frames are set within the context where the UAP is geosynchronous, where the camera isn't filming it, it's just set, it's there. And every single pulsation of line can be mapped to each other using these ratios. And so that's why I say there's 100% signal here. Each of its flashing seems extremely intentional. I say the duration and intensity is likewise intentional and conveys meaning. I'm just saying here, this is the basic outline of the grammar that we can use to start interpreting the geometry associated with a pulsation of lights in this craft. Okay, so in line with the Universal Language series, I know this has been a lot to go through, but I want to really analyze what this means in terms of the intelligences that we are interacting with. I do want to say that I don't have any idea necessarily what the specific geometries or the specific mathematical message is. It seems in line with instructions regarding the nature of the universe and science and physical constants and mathematics. And it seems also sensitive to our own inner lives and dreams. So I think there's a rich way of engagement. Talking now about the intelligences involved, because this is really where it hits home for me, is what are the types of intelligences that are necessary to produce a signal like this and be decoded in the ruler and compass method of geometry? Well, there's a message designer. Someone designed this message. And that person has an effective theory of our mind. They understand that we will recognize patterns, that we will recognize regular intervals, and that we can use the basic, very, very basic mathematics that emerges almost a priori out of our categories of space and time. Right? The ruler and compass method of Euclidean geometry. So beautiful. They'll understand that. They'll get that. They'll be able to figure that out. Here you go. So someone designed this message in a way that we can understand. In addition to that, there's the message coordination. So this responded to conscious intent. This was a response to a conscious invitation for communication, right? And as you'll see, if you go look at Rob Freeman's videos and listen to what people are saying, the craft seems to observe what is happening with the group and be sensitive to it, kind of even encouraging a sense of love, communication, openness to many different perspectives, right? Like that's the context out of which this flashing comes, right? In addition to that empathetic sort of message coordinator, there is this very strong capacity to deliver the message technologically, right? So the craft, there's craft navigation. There's a craft in the sky that is beaming a light message to us through light pulsations. Someone's up there, or some intelligence has controlled something up there to respond to human emotions, human invitations, and to somehow be able to keep a craft so perfectly that I could analyze 3,000 frames of a video without necessarily even moving where I'm looking. Right, so that is just a feat of technological ability that is relatively astounding, and that I think is what encouraged the MUFON investigators and the other analyzers of this case to say that this is definitely a UAP. All right, so what does all of this mean? What does all of this mean? So the ruler and compass construction and congruence method. Congruence testing methods involved with anomalous body marks, crop circles, and other data implies the following. We're dealing with geometric objects, so this communication is a geometric communication. It's a mathematical communication. It's not an accident. It's not space garbage floating around. It is intelligent and intentional, and it is a geometric object that we can understand in our mind. The mark makers are intelligent and presumed to be life like we know it. So this signal maker is intelligent and presumed to be life like we know it. Might be sneaky humans, might be dream entities, might be extraterrestrials, but they are intelligent like we know it. They are observant, and they have an effective theory of our mind. And then finally, they express through objective, interpersonal, and subjective means of communication. And I believe personally through my engagement with them in dreams, who have instructed me in how to look at these signals, I say that they want us to engage in both subjective and objective modes of inquiry. Their association with CE5 and intentional contact means that they are contacting us back. These non-human intelligences, or these actual intelligences that are producing this geometry, are contacting us back, and we are actually in a late stage of this dialogue, and it's documented and it's meaningful. Right? This video was 6 months ago. Right? There's more video like this from many researchers. Rob's done wonderful work across the world in filming these things, and now it seems as if we understand a little bit about the grammar of their expressions. So I would love to continue this exploration and inquiry with you. So this comes up and out of D-SETI. That stands for Dream Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or Dream Studies of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, depending on your perspectives. It's important to note that ET and NHI contact is a dreamlike experience, and therefore D-SETI honors the reality of dreams by respecting you, the dreamer, as the final authority regarding the significance of the dream, including the ontological authority. D-SETI offers dreamwork sessions and education through the work of me, Daniel Rekshan. I hold a master's degree in East-West psychology, certificate in hypnotherapy and depth hypnosis, and a PhD student in the Integral Noetic Science program at CIHS. It is important to note that both ET contact and dreamwork are triggering, taboo, and projection prone, so please be mindful. So, thank you for being with me as I presented this information. This came to me, the inspiration to look into this came to me very strongly through intuition. I emerged out of a dream state again to continue this inquiry. I am actually just floored at how obvious the signals are. The intuition says you just need to look at it and it'll be present. Follow the intuition. We are pattern recognizing, meaning making machines, actually, in terms of our minds and brains. And so we simply need to apply those and think less about debunking different things, right? So there's an intuition of meaning here. We don't necessarily need to focus all of our proof as to whether or not it could be meaningful, but assume that maybe it is. And how might that be meaningfully communicated? I mean, this is just sort of ridiculous to me that the Fibonacci sequence, as expressed through the golden ratio, is coming up in these geometries. This was predicted by, like, the movie Contact. Is literally, I think of it when I'm doing the geometries. It's the Fibonacci sequence here, that sort of thing. So it's really obvious at some level, and the congruence with the really correspondence with a human-initiated contact. We're asking for messages. They're giving us messages back. Let's have this dialogue, and if they're teaching us the language, let's learn it. So I thank you for being open to that notion. I would love to hear your inspiration. I believe that they really want us to work together in exploring this language, documenting this language, and having a communication. I think there's many, many different perspectives and many, many different parts that are coming together to really help us as a people develop sophistications like the technologies involved with making these marks, right? So the crop circles, the radio signals, the UAPs in the sky, the marks on the body, the meaningful dream experiences. These are all used. These are all technological applications of an intelligence, and we can see that in the various different modes of communication. And so that we see a similar language expressed through different means that we can start understanding these different means themselves. This is giving us a clue as to how light works, how sound works, how craft navigation works, or something like that. So I'm really excited to see what comes up and out of it. Like I said before, I really don't understand what the geometry implies. I'm just saying that this is geometry. doing the ruler and compass methods really do prove this is geometry. We're dealing with geometric communication, not just physical artifact or accident. So we can work with this like geometry. We know geometry. It's in our minds and hearts. And if we turn back to the geometric traditions of Western liberal arts, all the way back to Plato, all the way back to Euclid, we can understand that geometry has been used as a mode of communication, as a mode of remembrance, as a mode of engaging with the multiple different aspects of our world. So thanks for being here, and I wish you all the best.